The high cholesterol is actually a good thing.
A growing number of medical experts now say things like weight gain, heart disease, and other illnesses are not caused by cholesterol, but by something different.
Vegetable oils nearly doubled the rates of heart attacks.
One of the biggest lies we were told is that seed oils were actually, in fact, foods at all.
They say that we are missing the point.
For decades, sunflower oil has been hailed as a heart-healthy choice. But what if everything we believed was wrong? In this video, we'll unveil the dark side of sunflower oil and reveal how big corporate companies make profits from our health. Brace yourself for the bitter truth. It all started in the year 1958. A fit and handsome named Ancel Keys stands before a laboratory chalkboard to warn us of the new American plague.
It strikes without warning. Of 10 men, we can expect 5 to get it. But we can't say who, or when, or why.
When the war ended, Ancel Keys turned his scientific curiosity toward the new American plague, as he called it, coronary heart disease.
The facts are simple. You know the chief killer of Americans is cardiovascular disease, disorders and degeneration of the heart and blood vessels.
Now, here is the twist. Keys was not a heart specialist, not even close. He got his PhD by studying saltwater eels, not hearts or nutrition. But during World War II, the military asked him to create a meal that could last for years and feed countless soldiers. Once the war ended, the Minnesota Public Health Department hired Mr. Keys to study the problem of rising rates of heart attacks. At his first scientific meeting, he presented the idea that in countries where people ate more animal fat, people died of heart disease more often, suggesting a possible relationship.
Here are vital statistics. They show that this problem here in America is the worst in the world.
It was just a theory, but his research across 22 countries didn't quite prove it.
The reason he was able to draw a line showing that the greater incidence of heart disease you have and the more fat you eat was a linear line going up is because he excluded countries like France and Switzerland, because that didn't give him a straight curve. He studied 22 populations, and he only used populations from 6 countries. And
though Mr. Keys's research didn't really impress the scientific community, the margarine industry knew that Mr. Keys had created enough confusion and fear in the common people. They knew if the public thought butter and other animal fats would cause heart attacks, they could be convinced to buy margarine instead.
Pass the butter, please, Vicky. Vicky, the butter. Thank you. Hey, what's going on?
It's a crown, love. I switched from butter to imperial margarine.
You mean this is margarine?
Not just any margarine, imperial margarine.
The American Heart Association, which depends on large donations of cash from the vegetable oil industry, jumped on this concept with Mr. Keys.
Well, the American Heart Association did something that not too many people know about, and that's that they accepted $20 million in funding from Procter & Gamble in 1961. This company, Procter & Gamble, makes Crisco and other seed oils. Now, the American Heart Association started recommending people stop using butter and use heart-healthy alternatives like vegetable oils and these seed oils we just talked about. Now, this is what we call a major conflict of interest, and it was brought to you by big money and a big food corporation.
They took his sloppy research and eventually convinced most doctors that steak is a heart attack on a plate and the margarine made from processed vegetable oils was healthy. Within a decade, the grocery store shelves were packed with ready-to-eat foods, and Americans were buying into it. They swapped fresh, local food for factory-made stuff, thinking it was safer, healthier, and cheaper. By 1961, under increasing scientific criticism, Mr. Keyes began to not support his own diet heart research. He was publicly blaming animal fat for the surge in heart attacks, but guess what? In his own lab and experiments, he wasn't using animal fat at all. His subjects were fed margarine made from processed vegetable oil. And what was in the margarine? Trans fat, a full 48%. Now, let's talk about trans fats for a second.
So trans fats, they increase the LDL, they decrease the HDL, and they increase triglycerides. And trans fats worsen every one of them, and it worsens all the ratios, all the risk ratios as far as evaluating cardiovascular risk.
Because trans fats attack our body on the most fundamental level, on the cellular level, because trans fats actually weaken the cell membrane so that things that shouldn't be getting into our cells, like viruses, are getting in, and things that shouldn't be getting out of our cells, like nutrients, are getting out.
These sneaky molecules are the bad guys behind heart disease and have been banned from restaurants in places like New York City. These fats do not exist in foods that nature makes. These fats are born in factories.
In the last 20 years, trans fats have become the ingredient of choice for almost all processed foods. You can tell something contains trans fat if you see the word hydrogenated in the list of ingredients.
All the news reports you've heard on the risks of saturated fat and cholesterol are supported by studies that evaluated the effects of processed vegetable oil, which is full of unnatural molecules that aren't found in butter, steak, or any natural food. And do you know what's the world's most consumed vegetable oil? It's sunflower oil. Unfortunately, the public never heard the straight story. Over the past century, as butter consumption dropped to less than 25% of what it was, vegetable oil consumption went up 500%. In the 1900s, heart disease was a rare disease, but now it's the top cause of death for both men and women. Even though we frequently hear terms like trans fats and polyunsaturated fats, most of us don't know what they mean. According to a scientist named Dr. Gerhard Spitaler, who mainly focused his research on fats and published nearly 2,000 scientific articles, it is the processed polyunsaturated fats that deserve the blame for clogging up our arteries, not saturated fat or cholesterol.
Decades of advice to lower blood cholesterol through reducing saturated fat in the diet and also the use of drugs has failed to eradicate, if you like, the epidemic of heart disease. It's still one of the biggest killers in the Western world.
The real issue with polyunsaturated fats is that they are very heat sensitive. When you cook them, they get damaged and become toxic, including trans fat. These messed up fatty acids can clog your arteries when you eat them. And here's the twist. Industrial fat products like vegetable oils are packed with these delicate polyunsaturated fatty acids. They're heat sensitive, remember? So if it's processed vegetable oil or anything with it, it's practically guaranteed to contain trans fat. Today, besides sunflower oil, you'll find vegetable oil extracted from corn, canola, soy, cottonseed, rice bran, and grapeseed. These industrial-era fats cannot handle the heat involved in processing or cooking. Since it is cheap, it is found in almost all ready-made foods. Several decades ago, a scientist named Dr. Mary Enig presented her findings on the dangers of the trans fats present in vegetable oils.
Now, when it comes to the trans fatty acids, mothers who nurse their babies when they are eating trans fatty acids put trans fatty acids into the babies, and the babies end up with vision problems that goes all the way out to, and then just recently they reported that children,
they're not able to feel hunger, and therefore they overeat.
And they overeat, and they get
obesity.
heavy, and we have obesity.
Which
And
is
then
a big
there
problem
were,
in this
right,
country.
and there were people who were checking the obesity problem in adults in Pittsburgh, one of the medical schools, and they found that people who ate trans ended up with a heavier body for the same number of calories that they were.
And also trans has to do with your heart, right? Cardiovascular.
It has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with the immune system. And there are just many things that it screws up, because it screws up the way the body gives the signals.
Do you think Congress would have agreed? Would their corporate supporters, companies as powerful as Unilever, Monsanto, and ADM, have recalled the millions of products containing the toxins this scientist had discovered? Would they have abandoned margarine production and gone back to making real butter, trading in the cash cow of margarine products for actual milk-producing cows? We don't have to guess the answer.
Why don't you think the government does something about this?
Well,
They can afford to.
I think it's because of the lobbies. I mean, the high fructose corn syrup is driven by the corn lobby, and that's a very powerful lobby. Same thing with the trans fats. So we have to police ourselves. And the way I look at it is with entertainment. I mean, look at all the junk that's given to us on television and in movies, and we have to filter it ourselves.
Studies show that even bottles of organic, cold-pressed vegetable oil contain as much as 5% trans fats. Now, 5% might not sound terrifying on paper, but here's the catch. It's not about the amount in the bottle. It's about what happens inside your body once you eat these bad fats. They can convert good fats into bad fats and grow inside your body like zombies. Since governments can't control the vegetable oil industry and the sickness caused by this, it is in our hands as a consumer to decide what we should consume.
Based upon very robust data and studies now, shows that there is no association with the development of heart disease or type 2 diabetes or death. In fact, there is some data suggesting that saturated fat from dairy products actually may protect against heart disease and type 2 diabetes.
Let's talk about the good guys of the food world, natural fats. Nature has blessed us with an amazing variety of them, like olive, peanut, butter, coconut, palm oil, and animal fats. These fats aren't just tasty, they're some of the best foods you can enjoy. And guess what? In cultures where people heavily consume these natural fats, you'll find some of the healthiest people on the planet.
We've been told that red meat is unhealthy and will lead to heart disease. Now again, the organization reported that saturated fat leads to health issues. Interestingly, there's no science to prove this hypothesis. The American Heart Association even admits that meat is full of necessary nutrients and minerals like iron, zinc, and even B12.
What's even cooler is that these natural fats can handle the heat in the kitchen. Yep, they're safe for cooking. Now let's dive into the mouth-watering part. You know that irresistible flavor you get from fatty foods? Well, there's science behind it. Unlike sugar, which doesn't give us any real nutrition, a meal with animal fat actually helps us absorb other nutrients. That's why butter makes everything taste so damn delicious. In contrast, vegetable oils block vitamin absorption and don't do much to reduce your appetite. So, you end up eating more, but getting less nutrition. Remember, when it comes to fats, nature knows best. Over the past 100 years in the United States, our fat intake has gone from largely animal-based and natural to plant-based, and so unnatural that our bodies can't adapt. Thanks to Dr. Keyes and his associates in the industry, like the American Medical Association. We have been tricked into questioning our own senses, convinced that our health depends on staying away from these natural fats and allowing ourselves to buy tasteless, processed, neutral vegetable oils instead. Without even realizing it, we've traded in healthy fats for toxic ones, and now it's making us sick.
So when it comes to food choices, Dr. Teeter says don't worry if it raises your cholesterol. Focus your attention on reducing inflammation. with omega-3s and natural saturated fats. Some fats, however, cause inflammation, so avoid too many omega-6s and trans fats. How do you tell the healthy omega-3s from the unhealthy omega-6 fats? Vegetable oils and mayonnaise contain high levels of omega-6s, so be careful how much you consume.
The secret to avoiding toxic fats is simple. Eat natural fats and avoid processed ones. This formula works because nature doesn't make bad fats. Factories do. So, let's get back to basics and make healthier choices for our bodies.